Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. All taxpayers are now eligible for the Identity Protection PINs PINs. IRS Tax Tip 2021-07, January 26, 2021. The IRS has expanded the Identification Protection PIN PIN Option In program to all taxpayers who can verify their identity. The Identity Protection PIN is a 6-digit code known only to the taxpayer and to the IRS. It helps prevent identity thieves from filing fraudulent tax returns using a taxpayer's personal identifiable information. Here are a few key things to know about the IPPIN opt-in program. This is a voluntary program. Taxpayers must pass a rigorous identity verification process. Spouses and dependents are eligible for the IPPIN if they can verify their identities. An IPPIN is valid for a calendar year. People must get a new IPPIN each filing season. The online IPPIN tool is offline between November and mid-January each year. So before we go any further on this, just let's recap the IPPIN. What's it going to do for you? Why would you want to go through the process to get an IPPIN? Note that if you have a fraudulent tax return can be filed if you have the personal identification. Why would someone want to take the fraudulent tax return? Because if they file a fraudulent tax return with someone else's social security number, then they may be able to get access to a refund based on fraudulent information. So in the past, there were situations where people had their identity stolen. People got their social security numbers and other identifiable information, filed tax returns in order to commit fraud and whatnot and try to get the a refund possibly from the IRS. So that would be one reason to do so. And that, of course, caused problems when you then try to file, because now that you try to file your tax return with your real information, someone else has already filed it and used the social security number, and of course that causes problems. Then the IRS has to fix that problem. You go through the whole thing of fixing the problem. But then there's always the issue of, well, what are you going to do next time? Because now they have your information. They could do it again next year. And if they file before you file, it's a matter of who files first at that point. Because if they file before you file with the correct credentials, then they could just do it again. Well, what's the IRS's solution? They come up with this other IPPIN, which is a second verification number. So now you got your social security number. Now you got this second verification number, which then will protect your identity just like the social security number. It's more secure because they issued it later. Obviously, the social security number, given the fact that we've had it our entire lives, hasn't changed, and it doesn't change periodically, means that, someone could get access to it at some point in time. If you had a number that was more recent and one that changes on a yearly basis and one that's a second verification number, then it's less likely that people would get it. So that would be the fix that they came up with. And now they're saying, hey, look, why don't we just do this proactively? Why don't we give people the option to not have to go through the experience of identity fraud where their tax return is being stolen, and give people the option to have an IPPIN so that they can prevent people from doing this identity theft and filing a fraudulent tax return. So now they no longer are giving the IPPIN to just people who have already experienced identity fraud from people possibly filing tax returns that were fraudulent using their information, but you can now sign up for it proactively. So this would be a tool that you can do to kind of protect yourself in a proactive type of way. So given that, let's go through these what do you need type of things again. So this is a voluntary program. So this is not mandatory. They're not saying you have to do this double identification. It's for your benefit so that you don't have to go through the experience of, having a fraud situation, or less likely to go through that experience. And of course, it benefits the IRS as well, because they don't want to go through it saves them time as well if there's less fraud. So taxpayers must pass a rigorous identity verification process. So obviously, in order to get this new number, because now it's like a second, in a way, it's like a second social security number, so they got to make sure that it's you so they can process the second number. Spouses and dependents are eligible for an IPPIN if they can verify their identities. So notice that when you file a tax return, you have the primary social security number, and then you've got the spouses and dependents. Now with the dependents, then they're going to be on the tax return of somebody else, right? They're a dependent on that tax return. But you still might want that kind of double verification process, because there's situations where people will claim a dependent on another tax return. And if you want to make sure that somebody else isn't doing that, then and causing you problems because now your dependent's been claimed 2 times and that causes issues, then you might be able to do that for the dependents as well, which could be good. And an IPPIN is valid for a calendar year. So it's only valid for a calendar year, and that could be good because, again, the goal is for someone else not to get it. So if they change it every year, then it's less likely that someone else is going to get it. Now, hopefully the process of them changing it is pretty straightforward. They can just give it to you, the new one, each year, so that it's not like a burdensome problem to go. You don't have to go through, I don't believe, the whole process here to get a new number. They should basically send it to you each year, which should be an easy thing to do. So people must get a new IPPIN each filing season. The online IPPIN tool is offline between November and mid-January each year. Correct IPPINs must be entered on electronic and paper tax returns to avoid rejection and delays. So if you're then filing your tax return, of course, if you're doing it with tax software, doing it electronically, then you're going to need the IPPIN in order to file. That's the point. Otherwise, it'll kick it back, kind of like it would with a social security number. And that's the point, because if someone is committing fraud, like this is the fraud time this time of year, because if someone's trying to steal someone else's identity, they're trying to file first, most likely. They're trying to file before the other person files so that they can then have their tax return pass through, get a refund before, the other person files the correct return. Otherwise, the tax return would bounce back. So what they're trying to do, if you have an electronic filing and if you put the wrong number in, like a social security number and now the IPPIN number, the tax return will typically bounce back and it'll just say, hey, that number is not valid. It doesn't match up to what we have in the system. So taxpayers should never share their IPPIN with anyone but their trusted tax provider. Obviously, it's kind of like a social security number, so you don't want to be, sharing it all over the place. So the IRS will never call, text, or email requesting the IPPIN, so avoid the phishing kind of scams out there, those darn phishing people. So people should beware of scams and steal their IPPIN. There currently is no opt-out option, but the IRS is working on one for 2022. So once you opt in, you're basically in the program at that point in time, and you're going to have to keep using the IPPIN and doing the annual thing at this time. But they're working on an opt-out option if there's problems with it and you're saying, hey, I've had enough of this thing and I don't want to do it anymore, and you're trying to opt out of it. So how to get an IPPIN. Taxpayers who want an IPPIN for 2021 should use Get an IPPIN tool. There's a link to that here on the irs.gov, irs.gov website. This tool uses secure access authentication, verify a person's identity. Taxpayers should review the secure access requirements. There's a link to the secure access requirements here before they try to use the Get an IPPIN tool. There is no need to file a Form 14039 identity theft affidavit to join the program. And you might be saying, well, why would I even think that I would need to file a Form 14039 identity theft affidavit in order to join the program? Because before this opt-in system was in place, the only way that you would get this second identification number is as a preventative measure after a identity theft had already taken place. So you would have had to say, hey, there was an identity theft situation. The IRS would go, okay, let's rectify the problem that has currently taken place, and then let's try to prevent the problem going forward. Well, you don't need to do that anymore because now we're being proactive before something happens. Proactive. So once a taxpayer has authenticated their identity, their 2021 IPPIN immediately will be revealed to them. This PIN must be used when prompted by electronic tax returns or written near the signature line on the paper tax return. Options for taxpayers who can't verify their identity online. Taxpayers whose adjusted gross income is $72,000 or less may complete a Form 15227 it's in English and Spanish, application for an identity protection personal identification number. There's a link to that here, and mail or fax it to the IRS. So in other words, you probably want to do it online. That would be the easiest way to do it. But if you can't, then if your income is under the $72,000, you might be able to use this form. There's a link to that here if you want that. Check out that option. A customer service representative will contact the taxpayer and verify their identity by phone. Taxpayers should have their prior year tax return for verification processes. So obviously when they call for verification, you want your prior return so they can say something like, what was online, blah, blah, what was your adjusted gross income last year, and then you can kind of verify with them in that way. So taxpayers who verified their identity this way will have an IPPIN mailed to them the following tax year. This is for security reasons. Once in the program, the IPPIN will be mailed to these taxpayers each year. Taxpayers who can't verify their identity online or by phone are ineligible for the file form 15227, can contact the IRS and make an appointment to a taxpayer assistance center to verify their identity in person. So once again, online, probably the easiest way to do it. Then you could try this mail by form, but if you're not eligible for that or you have problems with that, then possibly you can go to the taxpayer assistance center to actually go in and do your verification in that way. There's a link to the taxpayer assistance center here. So they'll need to bring 2 forms of identification, including one government issued picture identification. Taxpayers who verify their identity in person will have an IPPIN mailed to them within 3 weeks. Once in the program, the IPPIN will be mailed to these taxpayers each year. So each year they should mail you just a new number. Should be fairly straightforward. They change the number each year, which will increase the level of security on it, and it should be fairly simple then going forward, which we hope would be the case given the fact we can't opt out once we're into it. But it's going to be good. You won't want to opt out because it's going to be excellent. So, confirmed identity theft victims. Current tax-related identity theft victims who have been receiving IPPINs by mail will experience no change. So if you've done this IPPIN thing already because you were identity theft victim and this was part of the solution to the problem, then no change here because you're basically already in the program and they're just going to continue it. They're just expanding it to be more proactive to people who have not yet experienced an identity theft issue. So taxpayers who are confirmed identity theft victims who have filed an identity theft affidavit because of suspected stolen identity refund fraud will automatically receive an IPPIN by mail once the cases are resolved. So if you're going through that issue, I'm sorry, that's a painful issue to go through. But if you're going through that issue, then you should get this IPPIN as part of the solution to that problem, most likely. So more information can be found below. We got the publication 5477, all taxpayers now eligible for the Identity Protection Program PINs. That's in English and Spanish. We got publication 5367, both in English and Spanish. That's the Identity Protection PIN opt-in program for taxpayers. And then we got the Get an Identity Protection PIN. That's on the IRS YouTube page. So we have links to those items here and many other of those linked items in this page. There'll be a link to this in the description.